Well, greetings and welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fredland, excited to bring you today's show. We're going to take a little bit of a break from our interviews we've been having and go back to something we used to do a while ago and play for you a recorded conversation we had back in March of several of us recreational players talking about the concept of continuation betting. And so rather than always just getting what the top end players are thinking about, give you a flavor for how we are discussing it as recreational players. And you can kind of compare and contrast and add your own thoughts and thinking to that and hopefully engage in the conversation about what you agree with and don't agree with and those sorts of things. So we're going to just play this conversation from March. We're not going to interrupt it for commercials this time, so I want to take some time on the front end to really thank Running Aces, who has become our official sponsor for the Rec Poker Podcast. They've always been incredibly supportive of everything that we've done with Rec Poker, of myself personally, as well as All In for Africa, the charity tournament that I started and manage as well. So just a real shout out to Running Aces. If you go down there and play with those guys, I would invite you to grab Jim or grab any of the tournament directors or dealers and just tell them, hey, thanks for supporting the Rec Poker Podcast. Thanks for supporting what they're doing. It's improving my game. I enjoy hearing from the people. Just encourage them and thank them for the support of this podcast and helping make this thing possible. So thanks, guys. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Free Poker Network, who is also sponsoring this podcast. So with that, the next hour is really just uninterrupted discussion between several of the recreational players that I know talking about this idea of c-betting, continuation betting, in the context of tournament Texas Hold'em. So enjoy that and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments, and we'll probably get back into the interviews after this. Thanks. All right, well, welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. We got a pretty sweet crew of guys here to talk about c-betting a little bit. So let me just. I'm going to turn it over to Taylor right away. Taylor, what's the topic? What are we talking about today?
Sure. So I wanted to bring up the topic of continuation betting. It seems like it's a topic that's evolved over time. I know when you read older poker books, they say you should be continuation betting a lot, and if you get even older books than that, they say you shouldn't be continuation betting at all, and now it's kind of evolved into you should be continuation betting most of the time, but not all the time. So I just wanted to bring up the topic to the group, kind of get everyone's thoughts about when should we be continuation betting, what are the signs that we should be looking for if we should or should not be, and then kind of if we do continuation bet and someone calls us, what are our actions on the turn and then river, so we can kind of plan that out and kind of be aware where we are on the flop.
And can you define, just to make sure we're all on the same page, like when you say continuation betting, is it betting, being the first one to take aggressive action on the flop after being like the last aggressive action before the flop?
Yeah.
Or is that...
I think the general term for continuation betting is pre-flop, you put in a raise, you had a call or multiple calls, and then the action is checked to you on the flop, and then the continuation bet is you continuing your aggression on the flop after you showed aggression pre-flop, whether you have a hand or not. Mm-hmm. It's not, continuation betting is not you called someone and then you lead out on the flop. It's the opposite of that. You're the one being aggressive and you're continuing to be aggressive.
So continuing the aggression.
Yep.
Okay. And so what's your gut? I mean, is there like a magic percentage, or is it all like every poker player says it depends?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? But I actually was talking about this a little bit with Mike Engelhaupt, and we were trying to figure out, okay, when should you be continuation betting? And he put out the idea that, okay, 2/3 of the time you should play your hand true, and whether you have a hand or not, you should bet or just check on the flop, and then 1/3 of the time you should just be aggressive and bet, or something like that. I may be screwing it up, so hopefully he doesn't get mad at me if I say something like that, but essentially kind of being random. But I think it's much more flop dependent on whether you continuation bet or not, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up for the group.
Okay. Because it's a good topic for me, especially. I just know that I'm people say, how often do you continuation bet?
I'm probably like 90%.
You can't remember the last time you didn't.
When I when I don't continuation bet, I feel dirty. And part of that, I think, because it does work so often, and it disguises when I actually have a big hand, because people are like, oh, he's just c-betting. The problem is I only have connected a third of the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think myself personally, I used to be very fluctuating in terms of when am I continuation betting. Before, it was very, very low amounts, maybe only 40% of the time. Then I realized, okay, I have to be aggressive to win hands, and it floated almost all the way up to 100%. And then now I'm kind of going back down where it's around, 75, 80% of the time I'm continuation betting.
So we're kind of on the same path, because that was mine. Super tight pendulum swings. Now I'm trying to get where's the right balance. I mean, what about you? What about you guys? I mean, as far as continuation betting and
what I usually do, it's about 50-50 for me, whether I hit on the flop or not. Sometimes I'll check out if I do hit on the flop. Sometimes I'll put out another bet, c-bet. It varies a lot, actually. So, it depends on how the cards are going too, and how aggressive I want to be. And with my personality, it tends not to be overly aggressive a lot of the times, because I truly feel if I keep the pot small, that I'm going to survive the tournament a lot longer than a lot of other people will.
so you're willing to maybe give up some of that fold equity from betting for survival
And at the end.
pot control. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so a lot of it for you depends. It's kind of what I'm hearing. It's kind of a feel.
It's kind
sort
of
of thing more than
yeah.
it's a standard. Here's the situation exactly, or here's the table image, or whatever.
Depends on the person who I'm against too. If I feel that he's been aggressive throughout the whole tournament or whatnot, I'll play some more hands against him. So, just to take a bigger pot from him later on.
But you think you're around 50-50?
Probably 50-50. Yeah.
I think I'm probably a little higher than that. It is flop dependent, and then it is opponent dependent. Because if you've got an opponent that is going to be a strong player that can float the flop, if you know that they can do that, you're going to be more you're going to continuation bet a little less, because you know that they can float and come back. And the worst thing you can do is continuation bet and then fold to a turn bet.
Or a re-raise.
Or a re-raise, right? You don't want to do that. So if you've got some passive opponents and you miss the flop, let's say you raise pre-flop with ace-king, you get a couple callers, the flop is like 9 high, you know it's probably hit their range better than yours, but the only way you're going to win that right now is if you bet and show strength, like you got the overpair. And then that's when I'll continuation bet. There'll be other times where if I have like ace-king and the flop comes queen, jack, 7, I might just check it back, because I'm expecting somebody else to have something that they're slow playing against me, because that's the kind of range of hands that people are going to call me with. So those are the considerations I look at. And like you say, there's times where if I do hit, I'll continuation bet those times also, because most of the time people don't believe you on your continuation bet. And sometimes you can get a lot of chips in when you're way ahead. So that's kind of what I look at. So I don't really have a percentage, I don't think. I try to be aggressive based on the opponent, and then I look at the cards and how they hit my range versus their range.
So you're maybe not going in with a specific percentage, but when you kind of look back at your history, how often would you say you continuation bet, like roughly?
It's probably over 50%, probably somewhere in that 60 to 70% range, I would think.
Okay.
It's more, I continuation bet more than I don't.
Yeah. And so Taylor started this thing with flop dependent, and you mentioned that you talked about it just, so you're saying, you're kind of looking at it saying, well, is that likely to have hit my opponent? If not, you're more likely to continuation bet.
Right.
Is that when you introduced it as kind of flop dependent, is that what you were thinking, or are you thinking?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, you kind of get in that moment, and like Carl said, there's that feel to should you continuation bet or not. And I know exactly what he's talking about. You kind of have that opponent read, or the flop came out a certain way, you just want to check or you want to bet in this certain spot. And I'm just trying to think about what are quantitatively those things that give us the feel of, yes, we should continuation bet, or no, we shouldn't. Is it the flop texture? You know, talk about our range that we have as a pre-flop raiser versus our opponent's range as the caller, and how does the board connect with ours versus their range? And it's kind of like, how can we quantify that to figure out, yes, this is a good spot to c-bet, or no, it's not?
So, so if you have a made hand and the texture is scary, whether there's straight potential, flush potential out there, I assume you're more prone to c-bet because you're afraid of the draws, or you want to make the draws pay for something.
Yeah.
Is that one
but
of the examples? Or?
I think my thought with the example that you just gave is, if we do have a good hand, say it's ace king and the flop comes out king high, but there's 2 to a suit or
Right.
whatever it is, I feel like we should be continuation betting there.
Right.
Because we're going to continuation bet the high end of our range and probably also the low end of
Mm-hmm.
our range. And is it that middle that we're actually checking back?
And so on the low end of the range,
Think so.
you're low end of the range, you're betting because you're hoping fold equity kicks in.
Yeah.
High end of the range, you're betting for value or in hopes of getting re-raised or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depends on how coordinated the board is. It really comes down to that. Whether you're gonna basically, I don't know, put a strong bet out there. Really, I would think. But some people want to do that with nothing. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that a lot with the pros and watching that on TV or whatnot. You see that they have nothing. They got 2-7 or whatever, and they're still going thumbs out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why their chip fluctuation is just enormous. It's just they're at top, and then all of a sudden they're either gone or right at the bottom
Mm-hmm.
within a couple hands.
No, they're willing to.
That's
Yeah.
that aggressive style of play, though. Yeah.
Yes.
It on the flop, once the chips are in there, they're aggressively going after them,
Right.
and it can lead to a very volatile game, chip stack.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're also getting that chance to have that high chip stack.
Right.
Because when you have that high chip stack and then you're still aggressive, it's very hard for opponents to play back at you.
Yes, it
Mhm.
is. Yep.
I think one of the things that probably is a hole in my game, which leads to too much c-betting, is I think I'm still in the mentality that I'm trying to win pots versus trying to make the best value decision. I just heard a podcast about that. And I was like, I think that's describing me. I bet pre-flop. Say I open with king queen suited from middle position, and I get 2 callers behind me, and the flop is 10 high. I bet at it because that's what you do, right? I mean, I'm not saying this is the right thinking, but I bet at it and I get a call, and then the turn is a blank, and I'm like, okay, they must be in a draw. I'm going to bet at it again, and because I'm trying so hard to win that pot, versus really stepping back and saying, what's the right EV play here? And maybe it's to make a bet, but I just hate that feeling of betting pre-flop and then just giving up.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm totally, especially against good players, if I check, they're going to bet and I'm going to fold. And I just hate I know. And Rob's like, so what? You made the right play. I know, but that's what I'm saying. I think my mentality, and I think maybe a lot of us rec players are in that mentality of, I'm trying whatever I can do to win this pot right here, versus thinking back. You guys fall into that trap, or you
No,
guys?
I
I
agree.
definitely don't.
Okay, Carl and Rob are saying, no. I'm saying goodbye to my wife now. Bye, Tracy.
I definitely agree with what you said, though. I used to have that mentality that I have chips invested in this
Right.
pot. I'm going to win this pot. But I have recently kind of backed off of that and gone more to the Rob of, so what? It's just one hand. I don't want this hand to define my entire tournament. I don't want to go short stacked or bust out because I wouldn't give up on my king high.
And Carl's saying the same thing.
Exact same thing.
But it's so tough because I totally agree. That's where I think I want to go. Part of it is that idea of I don't want to give up in this pot. Part of it is I know that works to triple barrel, and you pick, and not always.
And for certain opponents, though.
I know, and it just happened to me in a tournament the other day. I was playing the double stack at night, and I had queen 9 of clubs, and it was limp. Everybody bet 200 or called the 200, 6 limpers, and I'm on the button, so I just make it 2200. Boom, I get 3 callers. Okay,
Steve threw.
Well, right, and it was
I'm
ace
calling.
10 something. So there wasn't ace on the board, which clearly my opponent's gonna have. But clearly I could have as well.
Yes.
I hadn't been really active in that thing, so I barreled at the flop, and I get a call, and I triple barrel all the way down with queen high. Never got there, and the guy did call me down with ace 3. And I'm like, oh, I didn't expect ace 3 there.
Yeah.
But that's where it's like, okay, was that the wrong play? Because I think a lot of opponents will eventually fold an ace 3 when I showed so much strength all the way through.
Yeah.
But against the right opponent.
Exactly.
And
It's opponent dependent. Now, what had he been doing prior to that?
Well, and Dan Sjogren, I think
okay. Yeah.
he's sticky that way. I mean, I think once he gets a read, he sticks with it. And he said, "You're about where I put you." So he didn't really care about the 3 kicker or whatever.
Right.
He just his read all along was I was just making a play.
Right.
Yeah.
And so kudos to him. But I think if I really thought through who the player is, I do think I would have rethought that because I think Dan would have called with that. But anyway, that idea, like what you said, Taylor. Sorry, I derailed it, but that all of a sudden my tournament was defined by that hand.
Yeah.
As I lost 12 out of my 20K stack, triple barreling at this queen high.
No, and I have that happen to me all the time where, I just don't want to give up on a hand. I keep barreling and then ruin my tournament over it.
Yeah.
Whereas if I could have just stepped back and said, hey, I took my steal attempt.
Right.
It failed. Then everyone checked me. I had another chance at it. I went for it again. It failed again. All right, now I have to just take this as a sign. I'm going to back off. I'm going to check down. You win.
Just give them credit and
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Which is hard because I feel like it shows so much weakness.
Yeah.
But maybe,
That's why when I
Just
play
wrap the table next time and say you beat my kings. When you showed ace 3,
Yep.
and then you muck it.
Yeah. Yeah, that very good. Yeah, like kings are no good
Kings
here.
are no good, right?
Yeah.
It's like when I've never had any really good tournaments that I've played really aggressive on. All the tournaments I have played that way, where I'm just betting out, keep betting out. I am out before first break.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of tournaments that I've played that way, and it's not worked out for me. I don't know why. So now when I go to every tournament, I gotta remind myself to just be patient.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient. Be patient. If I'm not patient, I'm not in the tournament. It doesn't matter if it's a home game or playing a $30 tournament at whatever a casino. I'm sitting there on silent going, what happened? Well, I just had a ton of chips, now I got nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It can work out where we're being aggressive and then you hit cards
Right.
and then you make a lot of
Right.
chips.
Exactly, and then
But if you don't hit the cards and you're aggressive and you're playing against thinking players that know
Right.
that you can't always have it,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
they're going to call you down with
Exactly.
their ace 3.
yeah.
Right. And Dan knows I'm willing to make that play
Right.
as well.
That's the
that's
thing,
true.
that's the
But
opponents.
and that's where it's like, okay, I know I get married to hands. Was I married to that hand, trying not to lose that pot, or was that a positive EV play? I'm not sure.
And that's the question, right? We want to try and figure out here continuation betting.
Yeah.
When is it plus EV? When is it negative EV?
Get us back on track here.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that's the whole point, and that was kind of part 2 of the question that I wanted to bring up was continuation bet. Okay, you throw out your continuation bet, and they call. Whether they're on a draw, they have some sort of hand, or they're just going to try and float you. On the turn, then, what is your next action? When do you give up? And under what circumstances do you give up? Or do you just keep firing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a big part of my game. When people see that I continuation bet a lot, then they go, okay, well, I'll throw in the chips on the flop here and see what you do on the turn.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to turn honest on the turn and, check back, and then I can fire out on the river and try to take it from you?
Yeah.
And where is it a leak in your game if you're always checking back the turn when you don't have a hand and you're
Right.
betting the turn
Right.
when you do have a hand? Like, your continuation bet is supposed to disguise your hand, whether you're strong or weak. But then if they call and then on the turn, all of a sudden you're turning your cards face up and saying, hey, I don't have anything, or I do have something.
Actually, I can benefit you by not having something once in a while. For further, I would imagine further if you're in the tournament longer. I would imagine it would benefit you, but as long as you didn't damage yourself too much at that point.
You're saying go ahead C betting with nothing.
Yeah.
and then give up.
can create some equity.
No, I
just-
wouldn't give up.
And then you're talking about a double barrel. on the
yes,
turn.
on the
Yeah.
turn. And then after that, if he's going to, I'm gonna make it look like that. I want him to bet out, so that he's more likely going to check back to me, and then that's more of a pot control.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you're not losing. If he's betting out, you know he's got a monster. Then, if that's the case, usually, I bet you 90% of the time.
Depends on the opponent.
Depends on
It
the player.
does,
Yeah,
but I bet you 90% of the time I bet he does.
pretty big.
Especially the rec players that we are.
Right. The players that we're playing against, if they're betting out on the river, they usually got it.
Yeah, he usually got it.
Yeah.
So.
No, I get that river bets are typically honest ones.
Yeah.
I get that.
No.
Typically.
Yeah.
Unless it's Steve.
Yeah, I know. Steve and I
I'm just smirking.
People on the listening to the podcast didn't notice the eye connection that Steve just had and the smirk that we had afterwards of being honest on the river.
Right. But I think that is because I don't like to give up on a pot, and that I think is wrong thinking in a lot of places. So you had said, okay, so where is it positive EV? I mean, almost to C-bet,
Yeah, I
In
think
general-
c-betting in general is positive EV,
but to a point.
but to a
And so maybe I'm slow, but I kind of missed like you don't have to give away your whole
Yeah.
strategy, but like in general principles, you said board texture, but I need a little more.
Yeah.
Like when you say like what's a good, so what's that category of good situations to C-bet, and what's that category of maybe that's the time to slow down?
Yeah. So myself personally, when I c-bet, I either have a made hand. So say I have ace queen and it comes a queen high flop.
Yep.
That's a great time to c-bet because you're disguising the other times that I'm going to talk about where I don't have a hand.
Right.
If I have a medium strength hand, say I tried, raising at it with jack 9 suited and the flop comes king jack 10.
Middle pair.
Middle
Gut
pair,
shot.
nothing great. I'm checking that back almost every time. Those middle type hands are when
With the
I'm
intention of check calling.
Well, I'm assuming
usually
that
you're
I'm
in
in
position.
position here.
Oh, 'cause you
if
jack
I'm
nine.
out of position, it
Yeah.
changes things a little bit.
Okay, so in position, check.
Check,
maybe
check,
Out
see
of
the
position,
turn
maybe
card.
check call. See what happens.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically. And then if I'm on a draw, or I had completely missed the flop, that's when will also continuation bet.
Okay, so you categorize those the same. See, okay, so a draw
on
or
a draw and complete miss.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
I see those
categorize
as
it.
very different sort of things.
Yeah, but do you continuation bet differently with those?
I think draws are an interesting thing for me. I think with nothing, I might c-bet,
Mm-hmm.
unless I really just want to give up. But the draws to me are an interesting one that I bet there's different opinions on. Like, do you bet a draw or do you take the free card?
On the flop, I'll bet it.
Mhm.
And then on the turn is when I kind of start to reevaluate my life and say, what did I get myself into?
Yeah,
After I miss my draw. on
Well,
the
you
turn,
heard, if
and
I'm
then I have
c-betting
one
90%
card
of the
left.
time, obviously I'm betting my draws.
Yeah.
But I think there is some merit to taking a free card from time to time.
There is.
Well,
You bet.
It depends.
That's basically pot control, then, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're controlling your losses, or also wins. At least you're not. You're still raking in chips. You're not,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not throwing your tournament away at that point either.
Yeah.
So
Part of it for me is I'm always worried about getting check raised as well.
right.
So if I bet my people knowing for me if they know I'm going to c-bet a lot, all of a sudden it checks to me and I bet my draw and then somebody hammers it. Where I'm like, I could have just had a free card. I don't know, Rob. You bet your draws.
Oh
mostly?
yeah.
Yeah.
We call that a semi bluff, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah.
Because if you miss entirely and
Yep.
you c-bet, that's a bluff. It's
Right.
a raw
Mhm. Stone bluff.
stone
God,
bluff.
air.
Yep.
But if you have a draw outside, straight draw or a flush draw, something like that,
Right.
and you bet, that's a semi bluff, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they call, you still have a lot of equity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the perfect time to
Yeah.
bet and hope they fold.
I do tend to agree. I mean, obviously, I'm betting 90%, so I'm betting my draws
Yeah,
too.
yeah, you should bet your
But,
draws.
but
and
I'm
that's
usually
a
betting just
semi-bluff.
because I'm just c-betting in general.
Yeah.
But I've read some stuff and I've heard there is a school of thought out there that says just take the free card.
Yeah.
But you guys disagree more than that.
Well,
I'm
but you-
I'm 50-50 on it, so I
Yeah.
do either or.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you just said, when you throw out your c-bet and then you're kind of in that limbo of they raise you and you're not sure what to do, that's what I try and avoid.
Right.
And that's why I'll check my medium strength hands. But the top nut hands that I have, top pair, top kicker, if they raise me back, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Let's go with that hand.
Yep.
If I'm on that semi-bluff, I have a draw, I'm all right calling there. Because then the aggression goes to them, and if I hit my draw, they can bet and I can hammer it on them on the turn or the river and get a lot of chips in there.
Yeah.
And if I've got air and they hammer it back at me, it's an easy fold for me.
Very, yeah.
So I try and stay away from those situations where if we do throw out a continuation bet and they raise us, that I'm in a tricky spot. That's what I want to stay out of.
So if you're continuation betting with air and they come back at you, it's an easy fold.
Yeah.
So the
Most
only
of the
time,
time.
yeah, and that's a perfect way of doing it.
Yeah.
Because if they check to you, and then you bet your continuation bet with air, and they come back over the top of you, get rid of it right now. You don't go back over the top of it.
Right now I'm going,
my
well,
pot.
they're going to play on me. That's my pot.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
No, just get rid of it right then and there. They're telling you right then and there that they got a hand.
They got a hand.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a hand, get the heck out.
Yeah.
But if you, like you said, if it's a semi-bluff on a straight draw or a flush draw, you can go ahead and call that raise, that check raise.
I mean, don't you feel confident though?
Oh,
like
yeah.
say, you put out a 400 chip continuation bet and they pop it to 1,000 or whatever. Then you only have to throw in 600 for your draw, and now the aggression's on them. They're not sure how to react back to you just calling.
Right.
So sometimes it goes check, check, and then you get to see two cards, the turn and the river on your draw. So I mean, that's what I try and avoid. Is I don't want to be stuck in a weird situation if someone raises my bet.
Yep.
Interesting. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do have that idea that, okay, if I don't know, it's going after that pot. Okay, they bet they're just making a play, and I think part of that, this is where the mental game comes in for me too. But part of that is because I know how I play, which I'd be like, that's a great spot for them to raise, because I would do that. People see better, or I would check raise people all the time on a 10 high flop. If they bet pre and I called them out of position, I would check. They bet, I'm going to raise them big a lot of times.
With
I think,
what?
Who cares? they've got ace king or ace queen or king queen or whatever they did their pre-flop thing with. I'm saying, I know you're saying it cares, because what if it is a semi-bluff, is it whatever? I'm just saying whatever, because it's such a great way to re-raise them. Because now if they're sitting there with ace jack, they're going, I don't know, can I continue for this price? And you win a lot of pots that way. So because I'm willing to do that, when I'm the guy in position and they check and I bet and they raise, I'm going, okay,
you're doing what
you're doing what I would do. Clearly, that's what I would do. So I'm going to now put pressure back on you, and then they shove. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, because they're not doing that.
Yeah, right. And so I think there's something mental about that I've got to figure out. What maybe you and I were talking about earlier, Rob, just about that the willingness to give up pots. Like, I'll limp or I'll call a raise and I'm deep stacked pre-flop with pocket threes, hoping to hit a set.
Yeah.
And if I don't hit it, I fold.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking this in general. You're right. There are times where dang it, I had an idea here. But theoretically,
Theoretically, that's what you're thinking.
And I do that quite a bit, not always, but where you say, okay, I'm gonna play these suited connectors, and the flop doesn't cooperate, and there's aggression, and you give up. So I'm saying I'm willing to put in chips there, and then just give up. It was worth the investment.
Yep.
But I'm way less willing to do that if I've shown aggression.
Yeah.
Like, if I raise or if I c-bet, and then all of a sudden the situation changes with a lot of other aggression, I'm less willing to give up on that. And I think that's a mental block or something where, like, I do feel more ownership now. Like, or this pride thing of, you're not going to do that. You're not going to walk over me.
Yeah. And
I don't know.
like I said, I've struggled with this before too, and I'm kind of wondering if you kind of go through it the same way that I used to, where I would throw in the raise chips, and then I would think in my head, okay, there's a decent chance this pot's going to be mine right now. And then you have that mentality that those chips are mine. And then someone calls, and then you get there again, and you're like, well, those chips are mine. More are going in. Do you really want to fight for this? And then they say, yeah, I do.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, damn it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I really didn't think you would want to fight for those.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I used to have that mentality too, and it's just kind of like, you got to think about big picture wise. Like, my opponent's not going to get my chips unless I put them in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to choose when you put your chips in the middle. More so when you're in position, you can choose, how big the pot gets, but you have to be willing to put your chips in there for your opponent to be able to get them from you.
That's true. Yeah. And I always think about it the other way, like you got to put your chips in order to win pots.
True. Yeah.
But which of course is true, but there is that piece of it. And I feel like when I get to that final two tables, I'm much more disciplined that way. Like I'm going to make my chips hard to get.
Yeah.
Like they're going to have to work for these. But there's something that happens earlier in the tournaments where I'm not.
That's probably because you're trying to build that chip stack.
Yeah.
Which everybody wants to do.
Yeah. And I've had success in some cases doing that. So
Right.
here's the path.
Yep.
So when are you going to double barrel?
Yeah. Yeah, back to that.
With an unmade hand, or with a
No,
made
just in
hand?
general.
By double barrel, you mean now we're talking turn.
Turn,
So
right.
yeah.
You've
continuation
done
bet
the
the flop.
continuation bet. The guy
Yeah.
calls.
Yeah.
When do you double barrel?
Okay. So a lot of my studying and thinking about this has gone to how many bets can I get out of my opponent with my certain strength hand. If I have a medium pair, I can get one bet out of them, maybe two. If I've got top pair, that's a 2-bet hand or something like that. And if I have a set, it's usually, however many bets I want to get. So if I have top pair, I'll usually double barrel on the turn. If I have a medium pair, I think that's when I start to give up or, go into check call mode or, check turn, see what they do on the river and either call or check. And then with my draws, that's where I feel confused still. I have a flush draw on the flop, I bet it, he just called. Then turn comes and it's complete blank, doesn't help him or me. Do I fire out again?
That's when I take a free card.
Yeah.
I take my free card on the turn,
Because
not on the flop.
you're just hoping that he doesn't show aggression then.
Exactly.
Because good players will all of a sudden
it
you
doesn't
check the
matter.
turn and they fire.
It doesn't matter. If you take your free card on the turn, you're going to know on the river whether you hit or
yeah,
not.
but if
And
you bet it, at least you have some fold equity.
Yeah, you have your fold equity on the flop.
So you're saying once they call the flop, they're gonna call the turn? You don't,
They could,
Even if
but
they're
now
just
I
folding
can
you, though?
I can take my free card on the turn. If the guy has
if he
the guy
checks.
has a set, what's he going to do? He's going to check,
Right.
call, check, raise. And then I'm
On
going to
the
be
turn.
sitting there on the turn,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be sitting there. I'm going to lose my opportunity to go after that straight or flush.
But what if he's just floating you on the flop?
Then that's fine. I still got a ton of equity in this hand.
If he's floating, he's probably leading out on the turn.
Well, let's say if you're out of position though. I mean, you were saying take the free
If-
card.
No,
If you're out
I'm
of
in
position,
position.
it changes a lot.
Okay, so you're in position.
I'm in position
Okay.
because he's checked me again
So
on the turn.
okay. I
Now
see
I
what you're
take
saying.
the
Okay.
free card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now I know what's going to happen on the river. I'm going to know if I made it or not.
So you're more.
Now I can choose, if he checks to me again, I can choose at that time to bluff at it. Or if I've made my hand, then I bet it.
Okay.
Or fold it. Yeah.
Yep.
So you're much more concerned about being check raised the turn than you are the flop.
Most people are going to try to check raise on the turn
Yeah.
with a big,
Big
hand.
hand,
With
yeah.
a double 2-pair or a set. Because you're going to be more apt to call on the turn because you still have hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You still have another card to come. On the river, there's no more cards.
Versus the flop, they don't want to scare you off.
Right. They want to see how much more they
So they
can
just want
get.
to call the flop, and then
Sure.
turn is where they're going to try to build.
Well, that's
the
the
pot.
way I play.
Right, right, exactly. So you're
Yeah.
you're thinking that
I'm
way.
thinking
You're,
in that way too.
you're playing
yes.
game theory optimal against yourself.
Correct.
Interesting. That's
So
good.
so yeah, in his case, you were talking about the double barreling. I think I'm less apt to double barrel with a medium strength hand, like second pair, top kicker, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of hand I'm going to check down to try to get to a showdown. It's
Right.
basically they call it showdown value. Right?
Yeah,
You got
Pot
showdown
control,
value.
Showdown value. Yeah.
I'm more apt to double barrel if I have a made hand or air.
Or semi bluff, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to semi bluff on. I'm not going to double barrel semi bluff. Remember,
Oh,
I'm going to
that's right.
semi bluff on the flop,
That's right.
and I'm going to check back on the turn because I want the free card.
Okay. Okay.
That's kind of where
Yeah.
that's kind of what I think in general, and obviously it changes based on your opponent.
Which shows you how much value there is in position. And all, I mean, even just those sorts of things, you have much more ability to control what happens on the turn
Right.
in position.
Yep.
Carl, what are you like do you think of it in terms of like double barrel, triple barrel, or?
I do about 50-50 either way. I bluff on the turn sometimes, and I already have a made hand also, so it's kind of 50. It depends on how the board is coordinated. It depends on how aggressive the other person is too.
Yeah.
So, I'm more of a person that's going to sit and wait for you to make a mistake, and that way I'm going to.
He's looking at me specifically.
And I'm going to take a lot of chips.
Yes,
off
you are. Even for the podcast, you're sitting on my left.
So I guess that's my theory. Is just you know what, I'm okay checking all the way down. To be honest with you, I could check all the way through and have the showdown where I'm comfortable enough to win the pot.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, whether it's 100 or 5,000 in a pot. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with small pots. I'm okay with, it's great to have large pots. It's fun to have those, but what adds up during the end of the tournament. Do I still have chips in front of me?
Right. Yeah, large pots create variance.
Yeah,
one way or the other.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let you guys talk about this further. It appears my wife has maybe run over a bunny on her way outside of the the driveway. She said there's some kind of a dead animal in our driveway. It looks like a bunny, so I'm gonna go take care of that before other people arrive.
Okay.
But you can talk about whatever you want. But one thing I'd be curious in would be sort of how stack size factors into all of this idea around bluffing, semi-bluffing, taking free cards, all that kind of stuff. So. Sure. Well, you guys figure that out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take care of dead bunnies or whatever we have.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're talking about with continuation betting so far has been assuming we have pretty deep stacks.
Exactly.
We're pretty much all of our options are open to us because we have enough chips. So as the stack sizes change, obviously your willingness to put more money into the pot is going to factor in more heavily on what kind of hand you have.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we haven't touched on, but is a huge factor with me, is how many people are in the pot. How many people called my bet pre-flop. Yeah. And if it's, four-handed on the flop, and don't have anything, I'm checking so often there.
Oh, yeah. I'm checking all the time.
Yeah.
Against four players, yes.
Very willing to just give up there.
Yep.
And then the other thing that we started talking about was, stack size. And I think it's also like stage of the tournament. In the beginning part, I'm, willing to give up on hands, just try and, hit something big and then get value from it instead of trying to take a pot down for, 4 big blinds when the blinds are 25-50 with my ace king on a missed flop or whatever it is. But then in the middle stages, I think it gets really important to see bet because people start getting into that. I don't have as many big blinds as I used to. I'm going to be playing tight, and then you can kind of extract that value from them.
Yep.
Agree. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm curious as to how you guys would approach you're on the bubble situation or near the bubble, and stack sizes are small. Someone calls your pre-flop raise, you miss the flop. How often are you continuation betting there? Or are you, giving up and saying, I'm going to play my hand face up. If I've got a hand, I'm going to bet. If I don't, I'm going to give up because I don't want to bust here.
I'm probably the last guy you want to ask. I made a lot of bubbles. Or not, I was the bubble guy a lot.
I've been in my bubble.
I've been bubble boy many times.
So,
but I guess something like that. I'm just going to be. If I'm in a hand, I have to be aggressive just to get chips to stay in the tournament or stay in to make the money. It's just, your variance is still going to be, every chip you get from then on is very important to get past the bubble. So I guess I want to be aggressive. If I'm going to be in a hand, I'm going to be aggressive. If I'm not, I'm just going to fold.
Yeah.
For me, it's going to be dependent on how many chips I have, how many big blinds I have.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a decision pre-flop, before I raise, about how I'm going to approach the hand after the fact. So if I've got ace king, for instance, and I've got 25 big blinds, I'm not going to have a problem, raising 2.5 big blinds on the bubble. And if I do get a call, I will probably continuation bet most of those with another 5 big blinds, right? Say I get one caller, they check to me, I go back in. I'm gonna continuation bet probably 100% of the time in that situation, whether I'm hit or miss. And if they come back at me or call at that point in time, I'm playing it face up because I can't afford to lose any more chips unless I hit.
And one thing that's huge for me that I was wondering if you guys would say the same thing is the chip dynamic between myself and the opponent. If I've got a big stack, I'm going to be hammering away at a shorter stack and putting pressure on them. And if I have a short stack, even if I have ace king and I'm going up against a big stack, I'm going to be super careful against them because they have that ability to put pressure on you. If you c-bet versus them and they just shove on you all in, then what are you going to do?
Right.
Throw up in your mouth, right?
Throw up in your mouth first.
That's about it.
And then say, well, I got ace king, I better call.
Right.
Yeah.
He could be doing this with anything.
Well, that's it. Any two cards, and I've seen that happen many times.
Yep.
Where they'll call you with a 6-7, whether it's suited or not.
Yep. If they have the big stack,
If they have the big stack.
and you can't hurt them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that is a piece of this formula that you need to consider as well. In the early stages, you get in there and it's like, okay, we're all 100 big blinds deep. It doesn't matter. We're just playing to get as many chips as we can.
Right.
But then as it gets later, you're kind of playing for your tournament life, and then I think your idea and your ideal situation to continuation bet changes. You want to be applying pressure to shorter stacks and staying away from bigger stacks, if possible.
See, my problem is once I start being aggressive, I don't know when to stop. That's the hard. Well, I guess I do know when my chips are gone. But once I get started being overly aggressive, it just seems to pinwheel. Then I fall into Steve's category. I just don't know when to stop. Where I just keep, whether I have it or not, I'll just keep betting out there, just to try to get you off the hat because I want that pot. It's my pot. So that's why.
So at the more you do that more in the bubble than you do early on.
Oh, big time, yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
That's why you've been bubble boy so.
Oh, probably. But I've also made the final table half the time too. So.
Right.
Hello.
Don't mind the girl in the other room. You don't know that's my daughter. We just removed the bunny from the driveway.
Okay. Do you want to go into a hand situation? Kind of talk about continuation betting with this hand?
Yeah, we got like maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah,
Perfect.
Let's do it.
Okay. So this hand situation comes from me, a hand that I played recently. It was the same tournament that Steve triple barreled with Queen 9.
And when I came over, you had a big stack. You had like 60K early.
Yeah, I tripled up early. I got lucky, but then it kind of dwindled away. So when this hand comes through, we're at the middle stages. About 70, 75 people entered that tournament. There's around 40 left. We have a stack of, I think it's just over 50,000. So we're in a good spot. It's above average. Average would be 40-ish, just under 40. We just moved to this table, but we were sitting next to this table before, and we heard the people behind us talking, and a lot of those people just played a big tournament at Running Aces and had success there. So we know we're going into a table with experienced players. This is about our third hand or so, and we're in middle position, and we get dealt the Ace of Diamonds, Jack of Clubs. Offsuit. It folds to us, and we're in the cutoff, I believe.
Do you know what the blinds are?
The blinds are 400, 800 with a 100 ante, and we're playing 9-handed at this point.
So we got 60 bigs, give or take.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
So we have a decent stack. Folds to us. There are 2 short stacks immediately to our left. The button has a medium stack, probably right around average, maybe just under. Small blind is a short stack, and the big blind is a big stack. Probably has 60K like us as well.
Okay.
What's the small blind stack roughly?
It's
short
fairly small. It's probably just over 20.
Okay. So to at least think about what do we do if they shove or
Yep.
something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? And it's folded to you?
Folded to us. We're the first in the pot if we want to be.
Stacked.
Yeah, but I'm going to open 100% of that.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
2,000.
Okay. All right.
I'm there too.
All right. We opened a 2,000. Folds it around to the big blind, who completes, and we go to a flop.
Okay.
So then the flop comes out, and we have the 7 of diamonds, the 3 of hearts, and the 7 of spades. So we have ace jack offsuit. We see a pair of 7s and a 3 on the board. It's a rainbow. Big blind checks, and it's on us.
I love that flop.
I love that flop too.
That's a great flop for us.
Yes.
That
Okay.
is a great flop for us. I bet.
I would bet also.
Yeah,
Probably 50, 60% of the pot.
Okay, so are you taking into account the antes there too? So we
Yeah.
put in 2,000
Mm-hmm.
pre. He also put in 2,000 pre. You have the 400 from the small blind plus 900 in antes.
5,300.
So 53. You're saying
Yes.
25 ish.
I'm going to probably bet probably 28 to 3.
3,000.
2,800 to 3,000.
About 3,000.
Okay.
And this is like this. I know this sounds like I'm being contrarian, but like this is actually one of those flops that I might check.
Okay.
It might be one of the
And-
rare situations.
And what makes you say that? Because I want this conversation. This is
Yeah.
the type of situation that I'm in there and I'm thinking about this. Do I bet? Do I check?
Yeah, just because it's 5,000, how much do I want to put in? But it's also like I think I'm ahead here, and I don't. I mean, so am I betting for value? I'm afraid of the re-raise. I don't know. I probably at the end of the day, I probably would still bet this out.
You're betting
But-
for value because you can get a lot of value on a guy sitting there with king, queen.
Right.
But I'm also disguising my
Jack
hand
10.
against somebody who's maybe going to now start firing the turn and river and get some value there.
See, I'm going to find out where I sit. Actually, I'm going to find out if he has a
Yeah.
pair in his hand.
Yep.
If I bet and he calls, he's going to have at least a pair in his hand.
What if he raises?
Huh?
What if he raises? And this again, I'm thinking I'm playing myself.
If he re-raises, then I'm going to have to give up the hand, which is
Yeah.
fine.
Oh.
I'm okay with giving up that pot.
Yeah.
But I think I'm ahead of so much of his range here that I don't want
Right.
to give up the hand.
If you're ahead of his range, what you want to do is you want to bet and have him call.
Yeah.
That's how you get value.
Right, but I'm worried about a re-raise.
Oh, well,
If he
yeah,
re-raises,
I'm worried about tornadoes.
Well-
I'm worried about hurricanes.
Okay.
I'm worried about car
Well,
accidents.
so would you bet
Stuff
fold?
happens.
Would you bet fold that then? If you bet and they raise, would you fold ace jack there?
I could, yeah.
yeah,
I could bet fold that.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it from an equity perspective. I think I'm
It
ahead.
depends
I'm
on who the
disguising my
player
hand.
is. Who's the
Of
player?
course.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
Blake Bond sitting there
It's
and he re-raises you, what are you going to do?
it's someone.
Ship it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
If it's Joe Blow calling station from our normal everyday
Yeah.
tournament, what are you going to do?
Yeah, then I'll fold probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I mean, I just said I continuation bet all the time. It's just that's one of those things, and I might be a little bit scared of a weird 7. I know, but
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
You can't play that way.
okay.
To answer your question, I know it does come into play. This is one of the guys that was talking about his deep run in the recent tournament and someone that I peg as a competent player.
Okay.
So I do think this guy is going to make good decisions and not kind of be like all over the place.
Right.
Yeah, if I bet, I'm probably thinking I bet here, and then I'm just going to check down all the way after that.
Okay.
Check call down or something.
Well, I'm gonna put the bet out there. I'm gonna find out where I'm at. This is where I find out where I'm at. If maybe he had went in with suited connectors or 8-7 or
Right.
6-7, and if he has ace-7 maybe.
And part of it is I know if he stays in the hand, I don't know if he would just completely flow with air out of the position, but because it's not a very connected board or whatever, it's not like a draw heavy board.
Mm-hmm.
If he continues, he's got a made hand in most cases. I mean, what's he going to continue with here? That's
Anything.
not made. Anything like Queen
If
Jack's
he's,
going to
a, if
continue.
he's a competent player,
Queen Jack would continue.
if he's a competent player, he's looking at you saying, "Well, I can get this guy in the
well,
turn,
then he should re-raise.
or I can get this guy in the river."
Okay,
He's going to float
out of position.
out of position. Sure, why not? I played against a lot of players that think that they are the
Sure.
the best thing that ever happened to poker.
Right.
And they're gonna look at you like, well, I can outplay this guy, and they can float with anything.
Okay.
And I've seen that happen many times. I mean, I've won some showdowns where I shouldn't even have been in the hand, but I knew that the guy was just gonna try to outplay me.
Okay.
And if he's gonna do that, then he could do that with air. So
I just generally think the only thing that's going to call me here is something better than my hand.
no, there's a lot of hands that are gonna call you that are worse than your hand.
Okay.
A lot of hands. Anybody with ace 10 is gonna call, aren't they? Ace 9.
I don't know.
Wouldn't they?
Are they?
What are they
You would?
putting you on?
Something better than ace 9.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
Are they?
I don't know. I would if I had ace 9, if I decided to play it out of position, I would re-raise. I wouldn't just call.
And then you'd fold your ace jack if somebody re-raised you?
Probably.
That's way too tight.
Maybe. Yeah,
Way
maybe.
too tight.
That's kind of the book on me.
No, it isn't.
No, this is good. This is good.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
this is
exactly
a
what
good
I was hoping to
discussion.
get out of it.
And I'm just thinking, what are they going to call me with? And instead of if I just disguise it a little bit, if I just check down or say I've got some showdown value, I'm going to incent them to bluff. With their king, queen, jack, that sort of stuff that I'm ahead of, and I'm willing to call down.
Yeah, but those are the kind of hands that are going to call you on the flop.
I see. I just don't think they. I don't think they would.
I think they will.
I think
A
they
player
will.
like that
Carl
would.
thinks so too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
a player
think
like
so.
that would.
Because they
Fair
could
enough.
have 5-6 right there.
But would
Yeah.
you? But queen jack, somebody in the blind would call me with queen jack on that flop if I continuation bet.
Sure, he feels like he's still on the hand yet. He's got
two overs to the
He
board.
still feels like he's got a 50-50 shot to hit his card yet, where you don't hit yours.
Okay. See, and I would fold queen jack there. So that's maybe again you. This is why
And
it's
the
so
big
good because
blind?
yeah.
When you have the same chip stack as the guy who raised from the cutoff, perfect position. Everybody folds to the cutoff. You
I would
raise.
call pre-flop,
That's what I mean.
but I
You're
wouldn't
gonna
call a
pre-
flop. I wouldn't call a continuation bet with queen jack here.
That's called a float.
It is called a flop.
That
but I
guy
would
is
do it.
that guy is going to float.
But I'm saying I wouldn't out of the blinds.
I know.
And so then I assume that they're not going to out of the blinds.
That's
Yeah,
the
it
rub
is.
right there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the rub.
Because you're always playing against yourself. What would I?
I'm not
They're
playing
doing what I would
against
do.
the guy
Well,
because
that's-
there's
you're-
guys that are going to call with anything.
Anything,
Waiting,
two cards.
their calling
Yeah.
stations are going to call with anything,
Yeah.
all the way down.
Yep.
All right,
And
Taylor.
good
What's the right
approach.
answer, Taylor?
So, what was the consensus that we're going to bet out here?
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
what it
that's the
sounded like
consensus.
initially.
I'm going to bet out
Yeah.
25 to 3,000.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say we bet
Yep.
2,700 then.
Okay.
Big blind thinks for maybe a few seconds and throws in the calling chips.
Okay.
So again, we have Ace Jack offsuit. The board is 7 of diamonds, 3 of hearts, 7 of spades, and the turn card comes and it is the 9 of clubs. The big blind fairly quickly checks it to us.
This is where I'm going to take my 50-50. Either a continuation and not give up on the pot, or I just check it down to take a free card.
Yeah. If I bet that flop, I would bet this turn.
Okay.
If I decided to take that aggressive line where I open pre, I open on the flop, I'm probably going to continue to tell that story. I don't think if I gave up and sort of just played pot control, I probably would have done it on the flop. I think once I show 2 streets of aggression, I probably fire again. Again, it depends on the player a little bit, but I think I fire again because if I think they could be floating
Okay, so we started with
60.
60,000, and
Yeah.
so far we've put in about 5.
Yeah,
Mhm.
roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah,
For
pot's like 13
5,000.
or something. Or
We-
how big was the pot now?
Yeah, it was 53 before, I think
Right,
we
so
said.
we put
so
in
then we,
27, so
27.
10-6.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's about
Okay.
10-6.
So we've got about 53,000, 54,000 chips yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd probably double barrel this.
Mm-hmm.
I'd show them that I have an overpair.
Keep telling that story.
I'll tell the story that I got an overpair.
If I just decide to check, then I'm pretty much telling myself I'm going to check call the river
Okay.
with almost any river card that comes.
Right. So if you check and he bets, what do you do?
Well, we're in position.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
If we
we're in
check,
position.
we're seeing this turn
Right.
card.
Yeah.
He's
You're
already
going to
checked
call
twice.
anything on the river? Because what?
Pretty much. I mean, I'm
What-
willing to change, but I think pretty much like if I think my ace jack is good, if I'm, the question is why am I checking the turn? Am I afraid that I'm beat? Why would I check? I mean, or am I checking because I think I have showdown value here, and I just want to control the pot? If I think I'm good in the turn, that means I'm going to be good on almost every river.
Right.
So yeah,
I would probably bet out, and if I don't improve, check or call on the river. So what I'm saying is I'm looking at what am I going to do based on what he does.
right.
So if I bet out on the turn and he raises me, what am I going to do?
Right, then that's that's an argument for checking.
I'm going to probably fold.
You're folding before his chips get in there, right?
Exactly. Pretty much. I'm going to fold before the chips get in there.
But I probably, given that I barreled on the flop, I probably would barrel on the turn.
Okay.
And you can barrel on a turn and still have plenty of chips.
Sure.
Right.
And fold. I mean, you can
Yeah, 'cause you
barrel
put in
and fold.
5K or whatever, you're
Right.
still at.
Right.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't even put it in that much. I'd probably just put a 4K in, or
Okay.
or
I might
3.5.
put
3.5.
maybe,
a little bit more.
30% of the
Yeah.
pot, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, you go down on your bet size.
Yeah. Well, the bet size will still be up from the previous bet, but it's a
Right, in terms
smaller
of the-
percentage of the pot.
Because you feel like you'll get the information you need.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So can I go back, 5 minutes into our, well, not even that, 3 minutes into our discussion when we were talking about on the flop? Rob's talking about how I'm going to bet and there's a decent chance he's going to float and then I'm going to fire again on the turn. And he's still doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Before you said if I bet here and he calls, he probably has some sort of hand and that's when I'm going to slow down.
Right.
But then you get to this part and you say, I bet the flop, now I'm going to bet the turn again.
because
what
I
makes
think,
you think?
Because I think I'm committed to telling that story.
Okay.
That's what it is. I do think he might have a made hand.
Mm-hmm.
He might have sixes or something like that. But if I'm going to bet the flop, then I think I'm going to keep that story going.
Okay.
That's you're right. I mean, if I think he's got a made hand, but I do think if I've decided to show strength, I'm going to keep showing strength.
Yeah.
If I've decided this is the story I'm going to tell, I want to at least tell the story for another street and see if he believes me there.
Yep. See, I would
That's
take
good.
I would take another card here, but if I'm gonna bet, if I feel like I'm gonna bet the 3,000, 3,500, just a continuation of that. But 50% of the time, I'm gonna take that free card.
Are you checking because you think you're beat, or are you checking because you think you have
I
showdown
just-
value and you're just controlling the size of the pot?
I just want to control the size of the pot.
But you still don't recognize you still might be ahead.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still have showdown value no matter what. It just, I want the pot to be out of control. Or I'm losing a bunch more chips if I don't get my card, or he may have a situation where he does have a 7 or ace 7. People call you with ace 7 all the time, or ace 9.
Out of the blinds.
Yeah, out of blinds.
Ace 3 even.
Yeah, even ace 3. So I'm going to try to keep the pot smaller to where I'm still have my chips in front of me yet, where you're all of a sudden lose 50% of your chip stack all of a sudden. Just because you may have some showdown value. Why? Why would you? Just because maybe you have showdown value.
Did you say what you did yet, or you say?
I have not said yet,
Okay,
but I wanted to
okay.
bring up one more
Yep.
question for the group before we get to what our actual action is going to be, and that's what's our plan on the river?
My plan is to call down to check call.
To call if he bets out on the river.
If I'm barreling the turn, I get
So,
called. Yeah.
so we're not going to bet out on the river.
Not. I mean,
Unless you improve.
honestly, even if an ace or jack comes, I'm not sure how good I feel. I think I'm check calling down.
So
It depends on what he does.
yeah, I know it does, but you should have a plan if you're
Yeah.
going to bet out, right? If you're going to
Yeah.
bet this turn, you should know what you're going to do if they call your turn bet.
Depends what card comes up next. If I feel like he's playing, this is where I'm feeling what the guy's doing. How his body reactions going, his mannerisms, his how fast he's. A lot of things come into play here, but he may be just coming in with a king queen. If a king queen comes up there, well, I'm thinking he's got more of that type of hand than. He may think I have maybe ace king or something too also, but I'm gonna let him sit. I'm gonna let him dictate the next card. If he bets out, pretty strong or whatnot, well, I'm probably beat.
So the queen comes and he bets.
Yeah, you're probably beat. So then I'm just gonna fold it away.
I'd be more scared of an 8.
Well, they have that too. Yeah, that would be a coordinated. It's starting to become a coordinated board. So.
Yeah, if I double barrel, if I put the money in on the turn, depending on the last card, more than likely it's just going to be, I'm just going to check back if he checks. If he bets and I don't improve, I'm going to have a decision to make, and it's going to be dependent on how much he bets. If he's a thinking player, he might bet a little less than half pot to make it seem like he's just trying to extract, more value out of me. But it's going to be a decision that I'm going to make after seeing that card on the river. But I'm more than likely going to fold to a bet, and I'm going to check back if he checks to me, unless I improve. If I improve with a jack, I'm definitely betting out.
Really, you wouldn't just check that down.
I wouldn't check a jack down.
So
I'd
8-10
bet
doesn't
out.
scare you.
No,
Things like
no. I mean, it's in
So
his
7
range,
doesn't-
obviously, but
because you don't think he would check that. You
Right.
think he would lead that out if he had a 7 or 8.
if he has pocket 8s, pocket 10s, pocket 6s, he might still think he's good.
Right.
And I could get some value out of those types of hands.
Exactly.
He's not going to, obviously, he doesn't have pocket jacks, he doesn't have pocket queens, he doesn't have pocket kings. We would have heard from him by now if he had any of those hands. So there's a lot of hands that he could actually call a bet on the river if I hit a jack. So I would do that. Otherwise, I'd probably just check it back.
Okay. So in this situation, what is our consensus of what we're going to do here on the turn?
I barrel the turns.
So you say bet.
Yep.
I'm gonna, the way the hand is right now, I'm probably gonna check it.
I'm going to bet.
Okay.
I got
So-
enough chips I can bet.
Too many chip syndrome.
In this
If I don't have
situation,
enough chips, I don't bet. I just
I
up.
decided to check, so that's away from the consensus here.
Did you continuation bet? Did you continuation bet?
Oh yeah, I bet the
Yep.
flop.
Okay.
I bet the flop. I checked the turn here. So in this situation, we're going to go with my action. Sorry.
Okay.
But we decided to check the 9 of clubs. So the board is 7 of diamonds, 3 of hearts, 7 of spades, 9 of clubs, and then the river is the ace of hearts. And not long after the ace hitting the river, our opponent bets out for 5,000 chips.
I reluctantly call.
I would just call.
I call. There's no reason to raise.
Reluctantly.
I reluctantly call.
Okay.
No, I
We're
would-
never
I would-
raising.
I wouldn't raise. I
I
would
would
just
not
call.
raise. No, I would just call.
Are we ever folding?
No, not against
spot,
not
I
a
don't
$5,000 bet. No,
No,
never folding.
never fold.
I'm
There's no way
I'm
I
not
can fold that.
re-raising. I'm not full. There's
What's
hands
beating
up.
me?
Ace queen,
Ace queen, ace king. But we would have probably heard from them
7 that you can
pre-flop.
slow playing.
or ace
Ace 7, ace 9, ace 3.
Yeah.
Pocket 3s, pocket 9s.
Ace
Yes.
3 doesn't beat us anymore.
No.
Oh, that's right. The 7s are out there. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. So I'm just calling.
yeah, I'll call.
Okay.
No raise.
No
Well, I'll
raise.
We
call.
all feel
Just
fine
call.
with it?
Yep.
I'm it's reluctant for me.
All right.
Yeah.
So then the big blind flips over his hand and tables 4 7 of
Yeah,
clubs
gross.
for
Yeah.
flop trips.
Nice.
So he
Which
He
is
sat with us the whole way and saw the ace on the river and took us to Value Town.
Yep.
And did you call?
for him.
Or what did you
Good
do
for
on
him.
that? Ace? You just
I called.
called. You just
Yeah.
flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's...
I think you lost the minimum
Yes.
Yeah.
by checking the turn.
Yeah.
See, I would have heard from. We would have heard from him on the turn by betting the turn.
Yeah.
We would have bet our amount of money, which was like 3,000 to 4,000 is what we were talking about. He probably would have came over the top of us at that moment.
Or
in
does he
time,
just
and
call?
Maybe he
I
might.
think he just calls.
might
Given
just
this
calls.
opponent, he's very confident. He knows anything that we have is well below
Well
what
behind.
he has.
Well
Right.
behind.
Except, well, yeah. The only thing that's going to beat him is trip 9s.
Yeah.
So.
But can he put us on one specific hand? I don't think
No,
so.
no.
I think
He
it
won't.
makes a lot of sense for him to just call there and
Yeah, it does. But he
get
could.
more value.
He was
on the
dreaming
river
an ace
still.
would come. I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's the
that's-
magic card.
No,
yeah.
he saw the ace and he took us to Value Town.
Yeah.
But I think the big interesting decision is on that turn there. You know, do we continue out with that 9? I know I wasn't giving my opinion on this, but my thought with the 9 was it does nothing to our hand range and does a decent amount to his hand range.
Yeah.
Either he was made on the flop, or a lot of the hands that he will float with just hit there. And if he was floating, I expected him to bet out at me on the turn, and he didn't, which made me really scared of what he was actually holding. And I figured if he didn't have anything, he was just bluffing. My ace-jack is ahead of everything there.
Yeah.
So if I bet out on the turn, my opinion was I'm only getting called by better hands than me, and everything worse than my hand is folding. So my bet accomplishes nothing.
So which is kind of my mentality on the flop, but you took it to the turn first
Yeah.
and kind of used it because there's one more card to come.
Because I wanted the information on the flop.
Yeah.
My continuation bet gave me information about his hand.
Yeah.
And then on the turn, that's when I said, okay, I've got my information. I feel fairly confident I know where I'm at, and I'm fine, checking down from here.
And he was super frustrated that you checked the turn.
Probably. But then the ace came out on the river, and he was like, oh,
Green
vindicated.
card, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it still is only 5K, so it's
Yeah, it wasn't a huge hand, but I think it goes into that, when do we give up? Nothing here improved us except for on the river, and then they bet at us.
I've folded kings before before the flop. I've folded tens and whatever else beforehand when I've been re-raised. It just depends on how I feel. Sometimes you just know you're behind and you just have to give it up. And depending on where you're in the tournament too. I've folded fives, nines. I was tired of being the bubble guy.
But in this spot with a deep enough stack, you
Be
see
deep
the,
enough stack here.
justify the call there.
It's like I said, I would have called or checked and then called if he bet the river, because there's only a couple of hands that's going to beat me here, and it just he played it well. Well, give him kudos for it.
For calling pre-flop with 7-4.
Yeah, exactly.
Worked out.
Oh, he's in the big blind.
Yeah, it was a cheap call.
Yeah, it's
With the
fine.
antes,
Right.
it made complete
Yeah.
sense with me.
That's
Yeah,
why,
yeah,
right there.
exactly.
That's why you play that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, any final words before we wrap up here?
I would have lost a lot more money on this hand than Taylor
Yeah.
did.
Taylor just wanted to tell us how great he played it.
Hey, look at me! I lost 10K chips in a hand.
Where it could have been all the chips too.
Yeah,
So
but then again, you only have ace jack up until the river, and then you finally hit a
exactly.
pair.
Brian, you just jumped in. Any words of wisdom there before we wrap up?
Well, I've had that happen to me plenty of times.
Let's see,
I think you played it well.
Just brought back all these
Well as you-
flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly.
but if
Hey,
you
that
would have
just
had
happened.
eights, you would have got the same amount. You would have got the same amount of value.
But you're going to get good players play those types of hands
For sure.
all the time.
I'm alright with
I
that
mean,
though.
the better the tournaments, the more you're going to see that kind of stuff. If it's suited, semi-connectors like
Right.
that,
Yeah.
they stay in. I mean,
Well, especially in the big
for
blind
minimum
for a
raises,
small
yeah.
raise.
Yeah.
so, yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap up there. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Taylor, for the example.
Yep, thanks.
All right, guys. Thanks for the discussion. That was a fun day. We talked about that stuff, played little cards, had a little fun on that day. Also, just wanted to give you guys a quick update. I know several of you have asked about how it went for me out in Las Vegas. I just got back from Vegas as I'm putting together this podcast. Sort of mixed results. Went out there with a few guys. We ended up playing a lot of the daily tournaments at the casinos, not part of the World Series of Poker. So Planet Hollywood, the Rios, the $60, $80, $100 tournaments. And I'm really finding out that what used to be my sweet spot for those is really not my sweet spot anymore. The strategies that I take on when I'm playing a little bit higher level games don't always work for those games. I'm always surprised by certain things that people do that you don't normally see in the games that I enjoy playing more now. You see a lot of limping with aces and that sort of thing. And frankly, I just had a lot of negative variance. Boy, I got my pocket aces cracked a couple times. Once by ace king, once by pocket queens, both in really big spots. But with that said, I had a couple of nice deep runs in the daily 235, the daily 185. I cashed both of those, getting to the final 3 or 4 tables and really putting myself in a position to make an even deeper run. But those were nice cashes as they were, and I ended up cashing 3 out of, I believe, the 15 tournaments that I played. 2 of the other ones were bounty tournaments. I picked up a few bounties in each of those, paying for most of those tournaments. So I had a decent run. Ended up down for the summer for the time that I played, primarily because I played the marathon and ran into some really difficult variants there, and that was the big high dollar tournament. So I lost that. bringing my overall numbers down. But just a quick update for how I did in Vegas. Had a blast. I would do some things differently. I learned a ton, took a ton of notes that I plan on incorporating into my game as we go forward, and I'll try to share some of those in upcoming episodes and integrate those into conversations that we have with others. So thanks for those of you who were supporting what I was doing out in Vegas, for financially backing me, but also just the encouraging words that you gave. Some good results, some mixed results, but had a great time road tripping out there. Nice 27 hours of driving each way with some buddies of mine, and just had a really good time enjoying that as well. So with that, that's the end of this episode, and we will catch you next week. Thanks once again to Running Aces and Forest Lake for their great support. They are the official sponsor of the Rec Poker Podcast. Great card room, great people. Check it out. Thank them for supporting Rec Poker. See you later.